The chandelier lights glowed like melting gold over the dining room, and the low hum of wealthy laughter echoed across the marble floors. But when she walked in, holding her daughter's trembling hand tight, every fork paused above plates, every conversation froze mid-word, and the elite restaurant turned still, silent enough to hear her daughter's fearful heartbeat. A billionaire mother had just brought her child to meet the man who might save her life or destroy what little trust she had left in the world. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of empathy, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories to life. She was Naomi Whitewood, one of the most private billionaires in her city, a widow who rarely appeared in magazines or gala photos, despite owning half the commercial properties in town. Her fortune had been built alongside her late husband, a kind but visionary entrepreneur who passed too soon, leaving her with their only daughter, Madison, who was then just 10 years old. The world admired Naomi's wealth, her elegant presence, and her cool decision-making, but only a few people knew the truth of the quiet girl who lived behind the guarded estate gates. A girl who had once been vibrant, laughing, brave, and full of energy until a terrifying accident shattered her courage forever. Madison had been a bright dancer, graceful like wind sweeping over water. She lived for ballet classes and dreamed of performing on the biggest stages. But a reckless drunk driver had changed everything in a single night. She survived, but the trauma left her with anxiety, partial hearing loss in one ear, and recurring panic attacks in places filled with strangers or loud noise. She rarely spoke and feared crowds. She hadn't stepped into a restaurant in almost 3 years. Naomi tried everything: therapy, tutors, travel, specialized medical care. But nothing brought back the girl who once twirled barefoot through the living room, laughing like music. And as a parent torn between grief and hope, Naomi carried a desperation heavier than all her properties combined. She wanted her daughter healed, not for the world's eyes, not for public appearances, but simply to see her smile again, to watch her feel safe again, to witness life lighten her steps once more. That was when she first heard of Dr. Elias Hartman, a behavioral specialist who recently returned from years volunteering in rural communities, helping trauma victims regain emotional security. People whispered about his unconventional methods: gentle, patient, not businesslike, and often challenging. He wasn't just a doctor, some said he was more of a healer, and because he disliked fame, he refused wealthy clients. For months, Naomi wrote to him asking for help. He never responded, until one morning, after receiving a quiet envelope at her office with no sender stamp, she found a handwritten note inside. It wasn't a yes. It was simply a statement. Healing can only begin when the patient chooses it, not when the world forces it. Naomi sat in her car reading that message for almost 20 minutes, her hands shaking. She didn't want to force her daughter, but she knew Madison needed someone. She believed this man might be the one who could help her find herself again. Finally, after long letters back and forth, he agreed to meet, only if Madison wanted to, and only somewhere public, where life still breathed around them, where healing could be tested in the real world. Naomi hesitated, but agreed to his unusual suggestion: a blind meeting at an upscale restaurant. The restaurant was filled with glittering jewelry, polished suits, and people who measured success by watch brands and wine prices. Naomi held Madison's hand gently, feeling her shiver, her small fingers clinging like a fragile vine. She could sense the girl's anxiety rising with every step. She whispered calming words, though Madison could barely hear some of them through her damaged ear. People turned their heads, recognizing Naomi immediately, whispering behind their napkins. Many looked curious, others judgmental, their eyes full of entitlement and wonder. They were trying to understand why the famous billionaire walked in without her usual confident stride, why she brought a nervous young girl who seemed terrified just to stand among them. Madison's eyes darted, searching desperately for escape, her breath unsteady. Naomi squeezed her hand softly and guided her to the far end of the room. A man stood there wearing simple clothes, nothing expensive, nothing attention-seeking. His brown shoes were slightly worn, and his dark hair looked windswept rather than styled. He held no phone, no wine, no showy jewelry, only a soft smile that seemed to exist for the girl next to Naomi, not for her wealth. As Naomi and Madison approached, a group of men at a nearby table snickered quietly. One muttered just loud enough, "Billionaire taste? That her date? Doesn't look like he can afford the tip." Another smirked as though wealth gave him the right to judge. The restaurant wasn't loud, but Madison's senses amplified every sound, every stare. She froze midway, her breathing turning shallow and sharp. Naomi leaned down, whispering comfort, but Madison shook her head, feeling trapped, like she was back inside the chaos of that accident. Then something changed. Dr. Hartman knelt down to her level, not approaching, just offering a soft, patient presence. He didn't speak, he didn't pressure, he simply waited in silence with eyes gentle as if to say, "I see you, you're safe." And slowly Madison's breathing began to settle as she focused on him instead of the crowd. There, Naomi realized this man understood something no specialist ever had. Madison needed someone who wouldn't try to fix her, but someone who would wait with her until she chose to move. They sat down. At first, the other diners continued to whisper, behind their expensive glasses, mocking how a billionaire could be seen with a man so ordinary, someone without fancy suits or fame. Naomi heard them. She ignored them. She watched as Dr. Hartman began guiding Madison through little exercises, touching the texture of the table, identifying smells, noticing soft sounds, grounding her quietly into the present moment. He didn't ask questions. He didn't push for conversation. He helped her notice life instead of fear. Over the weeks that followed, they met again and again, always at small cafes, parks, libraries, or busy sidewalks. Dr. Hartman never behaved like a formal therapist. He treated Madison like a person learning how to step into the world again. He let her move at her pace. Sometimes she listened in silence. Other days she cried suddenly without explanation, and he gently helped her breathe through it. Naomi watched every tiny step, every quiet miracle, and she began to hope, not with desperation, but with patience. Months passed, and Madison began walking more confidently, speaking a little more each week. She still feared loud spaces, but she learned how to calm herself. One afternoon, as leaves rustled softly in a park cafe, Madison whispered to her mother that she wanted to order her own drink for the first time. Naomi's heart sunk with emotion, watching her daughter walk with trembling courage to the counter. The barista, unaware of the significance, simply smiled, and Madison did it. She spoke, soft but steady. Naomi cried privately that night, clutching her pillow, whispering thank you to a life that still had room for miracles. And then, unexpectedly, the whispers around the city changed. Someone had seen Naomi with a man who was clearly not wealthy. Rumors twisted the story, assuming romance. Society judged quickly, layering speculation, gossip, and false opinions like cheap perfume. The billionaire who never sought attention was suddenly talked about everywhere, not for her business empire, but for allegedly dating a low-status man. She didn't care what they thought. What hurt was when she realized that the gossip was affecting Madison again. Strangers criticizing her mother, mocking the doctor who was helping her. One morning, Madison refused to leave the house, hiding under her blanket, shaking. Naomi realized the world's cruelty could undo everything her daughter had gained. That day, she decided she would no longer be silent. She requested something she never had before, a social event, one grand dinner at the same luxurious restaurant where the journey began. And she invited every business figure, every critic, every gossip columnist, and every wealthy acquaintance who loved rumors more than truth. Madison didn't want to go at first, but Dr. Hartman sat with her and asked nothing of her, only reminding her she had the right to show herself when she was ready. Eventually, Madison nodded. When the dinner night came, the same restaurant shimmered with lights and arrogance. The same people whispered. But Naomi walked in not as a mother hiding pain, but as a woman ready to show her truth. Madison stood beside her, dressed simply, her hair gently pulled back, her expression cautious but brave. Dr. Hartman stood on the other side, not as a secret, but as someone who cared without seeking fame. As the chatter grew louder, Naomi lifted her glass, letting the silence fill again, just like that first night. And then she spoke, not in business language, not in rehearsed elegance, but straight from the heart. She told the room about her daughter's trauma, about the struggle no one saw, about the courage it took just to walk through these doors tonight. She didn't ask for sympathy, only respect for the resilience of a child healing at her own pace. And she thanked Dr. Hartman openly, not as a romantic partner, but as the man who helped her daughter find life again. The room was quiet. No gossip, no judgments, only stunned respect. And then something astonishing happened. Madison gently reached for the microphone and whispered with soft determination, thanking her mother and thanking Dr. Hartman for helping her not feel broken anymore. Her voice was shaky, but her courage filled the room far louder than any laughter or mockery. The same people who once whispered cruelty now stood, applauding, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because they were witnessing strength they never understood. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us spread meaningful stories to the world. Before we end, please comment below with one word that represents your hope for someone healing in their own time. Comment your word now, and let's inspire healing together. The end.